This week on the show, we're joined by Olivier, the creator of both the FreeNAS and the BSD Router Project. Wow, that's pretty impressive there. We'll also be discussing what the BSD Router Project is, what it's for, and where it's going. And of course, we're going to have all this week's headlines and answers to viewer-submitted questions right here on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 60, Don't Buy a Router, recorded October 22nd, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. Got a lot of exciting news, a lot of good headlines to go over. It's definitely been a busy week. I don't know about you, Alan, but I already feel like, is it Friday yet?
Yeah, I know. Wednesday.
But hey, that's a good thing. And then we got Meet BSD,
Yes.
of course, coming up in a couple weeks. So, got to get stuff ready for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But before we talk about some of that, let's get right into the headlines for the week. And first up, we have another conference to talk about, BSD Dev Room Call for Papers,
Yes.
which this year's FOSDEM conference is going to be having a dedicated BSD Dev Room. So that is very cool.
Yep.
And if you're going to be going out to that, they've issued a call for papers on anything BSD related. So, of course, they want to get as many presentations on BSD as possible. And we'd love to hear that you guys are doing that.
Indeed.
So I guess, where are they doing this? It looks like
It's in-
Belgium.
And
January 31st through February 1st.
Yep.
So
I think
if
the
you're in
dev
Europe-
room might only be this Saturday. I forget.
let's see here.
But the submission deadline is December 1st.
Okay.
The default duration for
Yeah.
a talk is 45 minutes, but feel free to ask if you have a longer or shorter slot.
Sure.
Because, some people will maybe only want to give a 15-minute quick thing, and some people might need a long time or whatever. Presentations can be recorded and streamed. Sending
Cool.
your proposal implies giving permission to be recorded. However, exceptions are made if you, for some reason, really don't want to be recorded.
Okay. Well, it looks like they have a mailing list already set up. They have a Pentabar account or a system set up so you can do your submissions.
Yep, that's the same one that BSD Can uses. So if you've done
Yeah.
BSD Can, it's easy.
That's very familiar. Well, cool. Well, definitely, if you're in Europe or you're in the Belgium area and you plan on going to FOSDEM, you need to try and submit something because that's cool. I'm sure a lot of people
Yeah.
would enjoy having more BSD related.
Having
talks
heard
at
about
conference.
that at EuroBSDCon, it sounds a lot different than a regular BSD conference like BSD Can.
Sure. Sure.
BSD Can or Euro, there's 3 tracks going at once. Apparently at
Yeah.
FOSDEM, there's 27 tracks.
That's a little busy.
Yeah.
So another interesting one I've heard of is Linux Talk over in Germany, and I've heard that one is just packed, 20,000 plus people or something. But that would be an interesting one if you're BSD folks who can make out to that. That would be a good one. I think I messed that one every year because it's around the same time as Tokyo, I believe, around Asia BSDCon.
Something
I
like
remember there's always been some conflict on why I never went to it.
Yeah, I've been looking at FOSDEM just because it's actually at a time where it's not going to have that problem.
Oh, so you thinking of going?
I think maybe, yeah. Some people at Euro were nagging me to come, so maybe.
Okay, well, very cool.
And you mentioned AsiaBSDCon. A reminder that the submission deadline for that is coming up. If you're submitting a tutorial, that has to be in by November 21st, which is only a month from now. And talks have to be submitted by November 28th, which is pretty much the same date as FOSDEM. So
Nice.
Make sure you get your papers together, and you can even submit to both if you want.
Okay, well, very cool. Okay, next up in the news, some Beehive information.
Yes.
So I guess Beehive SVM code has been merged.
Yep.
It's been in the projects tree of FreeBSD for
quite a while.
but now,
There was one point where it was working, except for if the code had been merged, it would break Beehive on Intel, and so it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's not
It's finally together, and it's actually merged into Head now. So if you grab Head after revision 273066, you get support for running Beehive on AMD processors that have the SVM or AMD V hardware virtualization extensions. So I know a lot of people that were very interested in Beehive were always like, I have AMD hardware, I can't do it. Well, now you can.
which I run a lot of AMD hardware here too, so that would be helpful.
Exactly.
So it looks like that went in October 21st, so yesterday. So if you're pulling head from any time after that, you should be in good shape.
Yep. It was originally announced on the 16th, and they had a patch for people to test, and a bunch of people did, and it seemed to go okay.
Cool. So one note we have here, though, Beehive doesn't support PCI pass-through on AMD just yet.
Right. Yeah,
so,
that one's kind of specific to hardware. Like the code will have to be completely different than the Intel one, and even the Intel, I think they only support pass-through on certain chipsets.
Oh, okay.
And then
also, there may still be some issues, though, so we got a link here to a mailing list.
I was following that thread, and it looks like the problem was that he didn't actually finish his install world, and so he was mixing versions, and that was his problem.
Well, that would definitely be a problem.
Yeah. So far it seems to be working quite good, and they had a bunch of AMD hardware they were testing on, but I know a lot of people were waiting for this, so I'm excited to see what they have to say and how getting more people using Beehive.
Yeah, maybe that'll be backported to 10.2 when 10.2 releases. Is that going to go into stable anytime soon?
I would imagine so. I don't know.
Okay.
You'll probably have to sit in head for a month or so, but yeah, I definitely would expect to see that in 10.2 or in 10 stable sooner. And obviously, if you're running Beehive, you're probably already used to running 10 stable to get the fixes sooner rather than later.
Cool. Okay, next up. Some more NetBSD stuff. We got those guys out at another open source conference, this time in Tokyo. And I don't know if you have the pictures up here yet, Alan, but they have a link where we have pictures of them with their booth they had there. And as always, since it's NetBSD, they're running on pretty much everything you can imagine. So I'll have to let you describe some of the pictures. Since
there's a Raspberry Pi, some cookies.
Cookies are good.
Kuro box. I don't know what that is. And then there's a shuttle XPC there. That one's... I'm like, why would they just be showing off a random x86 hardware? But it's actually running Zen. So it's NetBSD as a host for Zen virtual machines. Because NetBSD has that as well. It's being worked on for FreeBSD as well.
Okay.
And then, the table here is like 3 tables full of every random bit of hardware you can think of and all of them running NetBSD. Lots of interesting stuff.
Some of those BSD cookies look a little burnt. I'm just saying. Those are the ones that did not get eaten.
Yep. There's a Sharp Zaris, which is running the X-Scale 400 megahertz embedded processor. It's a little tablet kind of, well, I guess... It's the one with the keyboard and the screen can turn around and close or whatever. So it's like I don't know what they called those, transformer type things.
Sure.
But lots of interesting pictures here. And the mailing list post lists a bunch of the hardware if you didn't recognize it all. But the Raspberry Pi, ZenDOM 0, that then on top of that, they were running NetBSD, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, Dragonfly, and MirrorOS. They have a QB board, which is the Allwinner A20, Firefly Rock chip, Raxa Rock, Armadillo 9 and Armadillo 210, Kobo, BeagleBone Black, Sharp Netwalker, the Zaris, and a bunch of other Sharp machines, a NetBSD X68K, and lots of stickers and BSD cookies.
Very cool.
They also had a BSD Birds of a Feather session where they talked about some interesting stuff, including bsdresearch.org and HBSDCon.
Well, at the very end, they also have a link to the next event they plan on being at in Osaka, Japan, November 7th through 8th. It's called KOF, KOF 2014. I'm looking at the page. It's all in Japanese.
As you might expect for a Japanese conference.
Yes. Let's do some quick translation here and see. Okay. The Kanzi Open Forum, Kanasai. Yeah, I can't read this. But anyway, if you're in Japan or can read and speak Japanese, take a look at the link they have there. And maybe you go on out and support the NetBSD guys out at the conference.
Indeed.
Okay, so next up, we have another cool article, another Reddit post actually this time, about more BSD switchers every day.
Yes.
So first up, a dedicated longtime Linux user is considering making the switch. So he asked Reddit about the BSD community. He said he got tired of the pointless bickering he sees in the current community, asks if the same problems exist over here and what he should expect. So far he's found that BSD people seem to act a little more level-headed about things and are much more practical, Whereas, the usual suspects, Free Software Foundation, GNU, GPL people tend to make open source a religion, which, yes, I've talked about that in conferences as well.
Yeah. The biggest thing I would notice is that hanging out with FreeBSD people, no one's going to make fun of you for running Windows. It's like you have to do that because you want, you have something you have to do, and that's just
we're not
easier.
Fanatic zealots about it.
No.
Like, we have our preferred license, we like the way we do things, but at the same time, it's like, sometimes you just got to get stuff done.
It's like, yes, FreeBSD is great, we love it, but if something else gets the job done too, then so be it.
Yep. So we also have a link to another semi-related thread about a Linux user wanting to switch to BSD because of systemd and, of course, GNU people. So some of these are extremely well-written and a lot of thought-out comments in the replies in both threads. So if you're interested in that kind of thing or you want to throw your 2 cents in, hit up the links after the show. And, TJ, or I don't know if you put this here or he did, but maybe the original posters should have watched this show. So we'll put that call out. Just listen here. We will get you up to date and keep you informed. You won't have to, ping Reddit every time you have a question about that.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Well, at this point, we want to go ahead and mention the sponsor for the show this week, of course, IX Systems. And looks like no new FreeNAS release this week, so I'm not mentioning 9.6.28.12 or anything. But these guys, of course, they do make FreeNAS and sponsor PCBSD as well. And well, of course, I should mention the URL, I suppose. So ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Go there, let them know that we sent you. Fill out the little form there, and you can download a free guide on how to purchase a server for open source, things you need to ask your upstream vendor. And Alan, anything you want to mention? Have you ordered any new massive, crazy boxes or smaller ones?
Not quite yet. I'm still working on sussing out exactly how I want to build the next box. So I've been working with their salespeople and doing a lot of thinking and stuff because the price tag on the next one looks like it's going to be a little on the larger side. But, that's what it takes when you need to store like 300 terabytes of data.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Of course, the IX guys, since you said you're talking to a sales guy, well, the cool thing about sales guys is they're practically sales engineers.
Well, they are sales guys. They actually know the hardware.
They know. Yeah. They know exactly what you're going to be doing, and we'll work with you to try and come up with the best solution that's going to fit exactly what you want, not just sell you the thing that's sitting on the shelf, but what can we build you to accomplish the goal you have in mind. Like you said, 300 terabytes of data is what you need to realistically store.
I guess
I imagine you got to serve it at a certain speed too, right?
Exactly, or a minimum speed, exactly like they talked about in that article we talked about the other week. But I guess the other thing is the kind of litmus test you could do is like if you sat down a sales guy from your regular hardware vendor in front of a server that was torn apart, would they know how to put it back together? And then the IX guys, that they would. And not only that, but it's like if you sat them down at the FreeBSD console, would they know what to do?
Sure.
Would they, if you call up your other guy and ask, will this work if I, want to deploy this technology with this hardware and stuff? And they'll be like, I don't know what any of that is.
I don't know. Or how many sales guys who know what postfix, Samba, and NFS? And
exactly. It's like, I need to be able to do this over iSCSI and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oftentimes the problem you have is that the random sales guy will just say yes to every question you have in order to sell you the hardware instead of actually knowing. It's like, well, if you want to do that, you should look at this, you should look at this network card for it because it has the iSCSI offload features, which will mean less CPU usage on the system. So that's more available to do your compression or whatever.
Very cool. And since the IX guys do that, you don't have to spend all the time doing the research too. These guys know their stuff and they can tell you, this is the route you want to go. Here's your problem. Here's your solution.
Yes. Well, because the worst feeling I've had before is, we bought this server and all the hardware before I started using IX. I was like, I think these two pieces will work together. Or, in the specs, it says this works with FreeBSD. And then you get it, and it's like, actually, it only works with old versions of FreeBSD. The driver doesn't work with 9, only with 8. And so I have this $600 Adaptec HBA that I can't use.
Nice.
Well, I think eventually it got drivers for 9 or something. I don't know. It's in my basement somewhere now.
That didn't help you at the time.
And that's why I buy my machines from IX now, because I know that it's going to come, and as soon as I take it out of the box, it's going to work.
Yep, it'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So again, that URL for IX Systems is ixsystems.com/BSD Now, and please do let them know that we sent you. We would appreciate that.
I guess the other one was one time I ordered a server and bought some SSDs for it without thinking that the SSDs won't fit in the hot swap bays.
Oh,
because you need and after it arrived, I was like, oh shoot, and I had to order the special hot swap bays for SSDs, which are because normally the bracket you get to convert from a 3.5-inch slot to a 2.5-inch slot centers the drive, but when you're doing the hot swap bays, you need to align it to the right so that it lines up with the pins. And if I had ordered from IX, they wouldn't have let me forget that.
Yes. They would have caught that ahead of time.
Exactly.
Okay, well, cool. Well, again, take a look at IX Systems for everything big and small, the massive servers which we've shown in the past, all the way down to the FreeNAS Mini you can toss under your desk.
Yep.
So we're joined now by Olivier, who's here to talk to us about the BSD Router Project. Thanks for being on the show this week.
Sure.
Great. So first question we ask everyone, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how did you first get into BSD?
Yeah, I'm a network engineer, and I work for a big French company called Orange. I'm just a network engineer. I'm not system engineer at all. I'm not a developer at all. And how I got to BSD, it's an accident. It's not my fault. We need to go back to 2005. I'm looking for a NAS server for my home, just for storing all my DivX files. I didn't find. I had an old PC lying, and I want to put a Linux. I know only one operating system. It was Linux. I don't know about OpenBSD, FreeBSD at this moment, and I want to create a solution for my server. I didn't find usable solutions. I say, okay, why not creating one? And I start by using some stuff like some Linux embedded tools, but I never reached to use it. It's too complex for me. I had to use some compiler stuff, for compiling BusyBox. It's too complex for me. On one day, I had to update the rules of my own firewall. I have got a monowall firewall at home on a PC Engine's box. And by updating the rules, I said, I want this web GUI on my NAS server. I said, why not hacking this software for my NAS? And I go to the website of Monowall, and he has a good developer guide. On the developer guide is how to create a monowall from scratch on just a copy file. And this is my level. I say, oh yeah. Then I use monowall. I found it was something called FreeBSD. We don't know what, but I don't care about. And I had an install one, and I create FreeNAS in 1 week after this. This is how I get into BSD. It's not my fault.
Very cool.
So you got into FreeBSD by inventing FreeNAS.
Yes.
That's crazy,
I discovered very operating system by installing FreeBSD following the monowall guide. I got a chance because monowalls it's all PHP, and I don't know PHP, but it's just one language, PHP. On monowall, the guy had rewrite all the RC script. Replaced by PHP script, and I had to learn only one language, PHP, for all the stuff on monowall. And he didn't use some complex frameworks, just plain PHP text. And from a newbie, it's very, very easy to hack.
Sure.
Then yes, I discovered FreeBSD, I discovered PHP coding by creating FreeNAS. This was the story of FreeNAS.
So that's cool. I still have a soft spot for monowall. I like that project.
So can you tell us a little bit about the BSD Router Project, what it is and how that...
Yeah, like I say, I'm a network guy. I'm not a storage guy at all. It's became complex and hard to manage FreeNAS because I don't have storage vision of the world. And for example, I discover all the stuff when I'm reading the feature request list on FreeNAS. Some users say, hey, I want snapshots. Okay, what is a snapshot? I go to Wikipedia, what is a snapshot? Okay. And, I don't have a vision of storage. At work, I hate web GUI. But for end user at home, it's okay. On writing with FreeNAS, I had to learn some JavaScript stuff. I don't like to spend my time to all this web GUI stuff. I know it's not me. I don't have the knowledge, the level for building a good NAS system. Then I prefer to give FreeNAS to other people who have the job. But I want to continue to play with FreeBSD. Mm-hmm. This is why I say, my job is networking stuff. Now I will do a router stuff. This is why I'm doing BSD Router Project. It's just for playing with router stuff. On my vision is today you have lots of hardware device dedicated to routing. On my vision was today I think that commodity servers, x86 servers, should have lots of better network performance.
Sure.
It's a pity today the performance is too poor. Just a software problem. On NetMap or until DPKG prove it, it's just a software problem, not a hardware problem. This is why I'm confident. I think that we can see more and more software routing software.
Very cool.
This is why. Yes.
So is this intended for a completely different set of users than, say, pfSense? And what would be the difference?
Yeah, no web GUI inside. pfSense is a firewall. You can use pfSense. The pfSense can target a large audience of people. A end user at home, for your firewall at home, on big company. BSDRP target just telco or ISP. Mm-hmm. I don't. You can use it as firewall, but myself, I don't use it as a firewall. It's just a routing software, BGP routing.
Sure.
This is the main difference between. I'm working on a big telco. We don't want a device with a web GUI because you cannot manage a large number of devices with a web GUI. You need to have your own tools for managing, for pushing configuration. This is why I think it's a lot of difference with pfSense.
Cool. So what are some of the features and tools that are included in the BSD Router project?
Yeah, it's just a Nano BSD image customized with lots of routing software like Bird. Mm-hmm. It's very, very powerful, but it's amazing. Quagga, lots of FreeRPD daemons, OpenVPN, strong ones for the IPsec IKEv2. There's lots of this. There's just network stuff, routing network stuff.
Right, so that's, I guess, what makes the BSD Router project different than a pfSense is that it's actually going to speak routing protocols and talk to. Mm-hmm. It's more of a replacement for a Cisco router than it is for your home gateway.
Yes. I did not target end user at all.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned there's no web interface, so how's administration done? Is it like SSH or NSH like interface or?
Today it's SSH,
okay.
Command line interface. I'm a network guy and used to use this. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking about right now for my company, we're working on a large scale deployment of network device. And I'm thinking more to use Ansible. But I need to add Python on it. Python is a very big package. Mm-hmm. It's a 64 megabyte. It's biggest almost all the rest of the system that I need to think about. But so today it's SSH command. And this way you can use all your own tools that sends lots of SSH command for managing it.
Cool. So are there any specific hardware requirements? Like what kind of machines do people normally run this on?
It depends of what performance you want to obtain. I've got three images, one for 32 bytes, 44 bytes, and even one from Spark. It was just for playing with Nano BSD. How is possible to adapt this to a Spark one? But no, my Spark machines died. I cannot generate one. But on the device, it depends of how many packets per second you need to manage. And you need to add more packet per second you want, more core you need to add. You need to take care of about your network card. If you want 10 gigabyte, you try to, if possible, to avoid Intel. Just stuff like that. Intel is good hardware, but the problem is elsewhere.
Cool. So how do you guys do security updates? Are you staying pretty current with FreeBSD?
Yeah.
Heartbleed affect you guys or anything?
Hopefully just a router. I don't have bash.
Okay.
The problem is perhaps with OpenSSL, but just a port. Then I try to check if I have the problem. I try to update, but yes, when I can. It's
On kind of a needed case basis, I guess.
So, are you, like, when you build the releases, are they based on like 10.0 release, or are they based on like stable or current, or?
10.0 is not ready for production.
So it's based on 9?
No, 10 stable.
Oh, okay.
10
yes,
stable,
10
okay.
stable, because 10.0 was not. I've got too
Was
lots
not
of
good enough,
mbuff problem with the driver. Then I had to use 10 stable. But once I found a good solution, I try to. It depends on the network and driver. This is what's drive my usage.
Yeah,
Sure.
So yeah, you're trying to have a stable. You're not really chasing new features. You're just trying to keep it stable. But at the same time, you want to chase those network drivers because that's what makes a big difference.
Stability and performance. So this is why I got a parallel with the current.
So is there anyone other than you that works on this? And what other contributions have you had?
Not at all. There's no lot. I don't speak a lot about this project. I'm mainly alone to work on it.
Okay.
I'm the guy.
Are there any specific areas where you could use help from someone else? Are you looking for more people, or do you have it all in hand?
Yeah. Today, yes, looking for help. I just want to see if someone use it. The most important is why he don't like it. Because if you try a software on the internet, you download it, you say, oh, it's feel or not, and you forget it, but you never try to the author, okay, why you don't like it. I would like this.
So you need more feedback.
Yeah, more feedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever considered a version based on OpenBSD? Our producer made us ask that. Yes.
OpenBSD have a very cool feature of the homogeneity of the configuration, like the OSPFD, BGPD. For administrator point of view, it's very, very great. It's very homogeneous, and this is great for just for the management tools.
Sure.
But I speak about performance. No, it's not. I published some benchmark on. Even it's hard with FreeBSD to obtain the very good performance, hard like with Linux, for example, with the Intel driver. But for OpenBSD, no, I don't see, for example, multi-queue driver. I don't think. I tried OpenBSD 5, I think, or 5.1. You don't have multi-queue support or multi-thread network support. Like the PF on FreeBSD is multi-threaded. On Open is not multi-threaded. And if you disable all the multi-processor feature of FreeBSD, you have exactly the same perf as OpenBSD, like a one-core machine.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to speak about?
No, everything else. No, yes. Like I said with FreeNAS, it's if you want to create a software, you don't have to know about it. It's you can use it. It's
one other question was, I think it's OpenBSD has a tool like NSH, which gives you a command line interface much more similar to a Cisco.
Yeah.
Is that something that you'd be interested in, or is BSD Router kind of geared towards people that already know FreeBSD?
I like it, but it's this kind of tool because OpenBSD is very...
right. Obviously, having something like that for BSD Router Project would involve creating something new because we'd have to generate FreeBSD configs for it.
Yeah. It's a cool tools. But today with tools like Ansible or other stuff,
they already know how to speak FreeBSD, so you don't need to make that middle layer.
Yes. I think the human part of configuring a network device it's the end of the human. Away. Yes, it's the end of... now the configuration will be scripted or automatically generated. Then I don't know.
And then that kind of it's not like the old days where an administrator would connect to serial console and be at a command prompt on a Cisco.
Yeah,
it's more you push out your config to the whole network at once.
Exactly, because in previous days you have to deploy 1 or 2 routers in a week, and today with all the cloud stuff or other, you need to deploy 100 routers in a week.
Sure.
And I don't think you can have a human behind each of them. This one we need to convert to to the new tools like Ansible, Puppet Chef. But the network team are not used to use these tools. It's not our world. So it's an interesting change coming.
Well, thank you for being on the show. This is sweet, Olivier.
Thank you for meeting me.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we want to mention the other sponsor before we go into the news roundup here, but the other sponsor this week, of course, is TarSnap, and the URL for that, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. So, of course, you should be doing backups, and if you're not, well, shame on you.
Exactly.
You need to be doing them. But second, I mean, if you're going to do backups, you need to do them encrypted. You don't want to have to trust anybody. You don't want to trust the remote end. This way you don't have to. TarSnap is online backups for the truly paranoid, which I like that catchphrase.
Yes.
Because we all should be truly paranoid when it comes right down to it. And since they don't have access to your data, it's all encrypted before it leaves your box. They don't know what it is, and they can't be able to turn it over to somebody and decrypt it and all that.
Well,
so
it kind of came around the same way a lot of stuff does in our industry. Colin was the FreeBSD security officer at the time, and he needed to back up his laptop because he goes to conferences and it might get damaged or something could happen.
Stolen or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And but being the FreeBSD security officer, he has access to a lot of stuff that it would be very, very bad if other people got a hold of. Like, discussions about zero-day exploits that are going to be patched in the next week or whatever. And so he needed a backup service that he could be sure wouldn't cause a problem. And after looking around, he found that there wasn't one. So he built it.
Well, that's what you'll want to take a look at then, because TarSnap's going to make this easy for you, and you can have that same level of security for anything you're doing, you know, whether it's something you really need to keep private or not. I mean, it's just better not to have to worry about that at all.
Exactly.
So again, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you. Okay, so our news roundup for the week. Our first up, we got a cool blog article talking about a FreeBSD current on a T420. So if you've been to any of the conferences, you know that ThinkPads are definitely quite popular with BSD developers and users. There's a lot of them running around out there. And most of the hardware seems to be supported quite well across the BSDs, especially Wi-Fi. You know, good components will help with that, I'm sure. But this article is going to walk through installing FreeBSD current on a ThinkPad 420 with UEFI. Very cool. So if you have a ThinkPad, or especially if you have this specific one, you should take a look at some of the steps involved. There was also an issue mentioned in there, and Alan, you said
yes. So
you may have fixed that.
In particular, it mentions a BIOS bug in the BIOS on Lenovo T420 and a bunch of other models, where when it sees a GPT partition, if a certain flag isn't set in that partition, basically the way GPT works is it contains what's called a protective MBR. The first 512 bytes of the partition table look like an MBR partition table. So an OS that doesn't understand GPT will see a partition table there and say, okay, that's a disk I don't understand. Whereas by default on Windows, like if you have Windows 98 or something, I think even XP doesn't support GPT. If it sees a disk and it doesn't recognize anything about it, it'll offer to format it.
Not good.
Right. And so you don't want, if you're dual booting or something in your other OS, to decide to format the partition with your first OS on it.
Let me make that available for you.
So by putting this little fake MBR record on it, it says, okay, that's a drive, I'll just ignore it. But apparently the Lenovo BIOS, if it doesn't see that the first partition or a partition on that fake boot record or master boot record table is set active, it will decide that there's no bootable partitions on that disk without actually going through and actually seeing the GPT part of it. And so we've been addressing that. There's a PR open on bugs.freebsd.org, and I posted a patch last night along with some images, some updated Glenn's snapshot images for people to try out. So if you happen to have one of these Lenovo's that was giving you issues, if you could test that for me, that would be great. And so basically by running the command gpart set -a active on the disk, normally you can set a specific partition active, but if you run it on the whole disk when it's GPT, it'll set the flag in the master boot record, and that seems to solve this problem. So we're working on getting that integrated into the rest of the installer, but if you're doing the ZFS option in the installer, that will just work from now on.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, look at that. That's some quick turnaround time there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's like I posted this patch just before this guy posted his article or whatever. But it gives you full screenshots and actually walks through doing the entire install, including the ZFS auto mode. And you can see it's using encrypted and mirrored swap and all the fun features I added at BSD CAN. Setting up the encrypted disks, passphrases, and once he finishes the installer, yes, he goes about actually installing X and configuring how, setting the C states so that you can get better battery life. Although he doesn't look like he enabled powered D, but anyway. And then the stuff to use the VT mode for the graphics and to load his the Intel driver with its power saving settings turned on as well.
Nice. Well, definitely a cool article. And
even if you don't have a T520 or T420, some of this information is very useful for getting more battery life out of your laptop as well.
Definitely. Yeah, there's just a lot of good info here, especially just using it as a starting point for getting installed on any laptop, I suppose. But there's some specific stuff to the T420 here. But yeah, this is quite cool. And he said it was a current image he was doing as well. So
yes. He was using the most recent 11 snapshot. On the website, I have a modified version of that or the one previous snapshot, which is exactly the same, except for I've updated the installer code to have this new feature. Although currently that feature only works on the ZFS auto mode. If you do manual or the other mode, so here's the screenshot. If you do UFS or manual, it won't do it. However, if you want, just drop to the shell at the end of the install and run the gpart set -a active on the drive, and that should solve it as well.
So you set it on the drive or the particular partition?
You set it on the drive itself when it's a GPT. Now, separately, you can set active on a partition, and that's how you can have nano BSD type setup going on. But that's not what we're after. We're just setting the active flag in the fake MBR so that the BIOS will stop being a goof.
Okay. Oh, very cool. Somebody was asking if this was a Haswell GPU on the
T420.
No,
the T420 is 2 generations old. So that'll be a Sandy Bridge. So it'll work great with the Intel drivers.
Nice. And the Haswell stuff's coming soon.
Yes, there's an updated version of the patch for improving the features, but not actually doing Haswell that came out yesterday.
So getting close, though.
Yes, and once that's all in, then they can drop the Haswell patch on us.
Cool. Okay, well, next up, article about FreeNAS on a Supermicro 5018A-MHN4, if you have that specific Supermicro. So, of course, more and more people are starting to migrate their NAS devices to BSD-based solutions. Aha, very cool. In this post, the author goes through the process of setting up FreeNAS on some of his new hardware. And so he has a new rack mount FreeNAS machine, which has a low-power Atom with 8 cores and 64 gigabytes of memory, which is quite a lot for a small form factor like that. And the rest of the post details all the hardware he chose and why, and goes through the build process with lots of cool pictures, which I'm sure you could probably show there,
I'm showing those.
Okay, so very cool. But again, very detailed. And if you're in the market for needing to build yourself, do a do-it-yourself FreeNAS box, again, great place to start. And he's got some really handy-dandy little graphs at the end showing you some of his performance. And if you could show that one there, Alan, that's actually quite helpful.
Yeah, lots of good stuff. Shows building it and booting off the USB stick. And he's got comparing using compression and having no L2 ARC, then compression with an L2 ARC on an SSD, or without compression and without compression and an L2 ARC. And basically, he found that with compression, he's getting almost double the read rate, and that's because you're maxing out what the drives can do, except for then you're decompressing it and getting that much more data, and so your write rates will be much higher as well. Yeah, he's even rewriting data. He's still getting twice the performance with compression than without. And this is
so you want compression on basically.
Yeah, especially since the LZ4 compression in ZFS has an early abort. So if you start copying an already compressed file, like a .tar.gz or something, if it doesn't compress more than 12.5%, it'll just stop compressing and write it uncompressed. So it won't burn a lot of CPU anyway. And it doesn't use that so much CPU for compression anyway. I think it can compress over a gigabyte per second per core on even like a laptop processor. Nice. And with this, even with this small 8-core Atom, he's getting double performance just from compression.
Fantastic. Well, I love in his conclusion, he says the system is only a 50-watt system, definitely low power consumption.
And that's with all the drives and all the sticks of RAM and all that stuff. Because I think, that processor is only 17 or 20 watts. And so, even with all the fans in that little 1U, because there's quite a bit of fans in there, he's still getting quite the good performance.
Very nice, very nice. Well, if that's something you're interested in doing, have a nice weekend project, take a look at this article. This will definitely help get you going that way. And of course, he lists the components he used and prices for all that. So.
Prices are even in Canadian dollars. So if you're buying in the States, you can expect to spend slightly less than that because of the exchange rate.
Sure. Okay, well, next up, we have some hardened BSD stuff. I guess related to the hardened BSD folks. So an article about hardening ProcFS and LinProcFS. And of course, it looks like Sean Webb wrote this over at the Hardened BSD project. And just a little background, there was an exploit published recently for SFTP and OpenSSH, but it mostly just affected Linux. But there is a native ProcFS in FreeBSD, which was the target of that exploit, but it's not used that often.
Right, and it has to be manually enabled by the administrator, so it wouldn't. It's not on most systems.
Sure, and the Linux simulation layer also has its own ProcFS, which was affected as well. So the Hardened BSD guys, Sean in this case, weigh in on how to best solve the problem and now support an additional protection layer from writing to memory with ProcFS. Yep. So that's very cool. And of course, we've talked to Sean in the past, but about Hardened BSD and then ASLR and what they're doing over there. So take a look at that interview if you missed that episode previously.
Yep.
See any other takeaways from that you want to?
Not really. But it's just Hardened BSD is basically a repo where they coordinate all their work on improving security in BSD, and then once it's ready, then they do push it upstream into regular FreeBSD. So it's just a staging repo, so it's easier to let people contribute and to place to put all their patches instead of as individual files floating around on mailing lists. It's just easier that way.
Okay. Well, last for our news roundup this week, we have an article on pfSense monitoring with bandwidth D.
Yes.
And I'll let you bring that up here, Alan, so we can show some of the pictures.
Yep. So they show configuring it in pfSense, teaching it about the different things, whether you can choose what time periods you want to display over, how often you want to generate the images, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And then pictures of what some of the graphs look like as well. Mm-hmm. So this article is going to walk you through basically the whole setup of bandwidth D to do this, which bandwidth D monitors based on IP address rather than per interface.
Yes, so it works. FYI. It works great on your pfSense because basically it'll let you see, all right, this is how much traffic is going in and out to the internet from my pfSense, and then break it down by which machines on my LAN are causing that traffic.
Who's doing what?
Yeah, so you can find the guy that's causing all your bandwidth usage and figure out which thing he's doing that using up all that usage, if it's just HTTP or if he's doing a lot of FTP or if it's all peer-to-peer.
Sure. Very cool. It also builds some cool HTML graphs, which, as you know, we've mentioned here many of these other projects that do this. We love pfSense graphs. But take a look at our previous bandwidth monitoring and testing tutorial we did for some more ideas on how you can do this and kind of take control of your network, see what's going on, and monitor it more efficiently.
Yep. They also have an option to output their monitoring data to a PostgreSQL database, which you can then do whatever you want with it as well.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, so it's a nice article on monitoring your bandwidth on your pfSense, which is one of the great things about having a device you control being at the edge of your network instead of, that little box that your ISP gave you or that you bought at
Best Buy. Right. Okay, it's time for questions and feedback from you guys out in the audience. So first up, we have an email from Dave asking about UEFI and Xorg. So he says, "Hi, love your BSD podcast work. Thanks." Well, Thank you. We appreciate it. He said he's confused about how UEFI and Xorg drivers are supposed to work together. Maybe you can help with a flowchart or some explanation of how this all fits together to help getting a working system. So his background, he said he's been using current and most recently 10.1 betas to take advantage of UEFI boot, Beehive, and the latest ZFS functionality like bookmarks. He said he uses this on a couple of almost X OS X Apple computers, an early MacBook Pro 2011, and then a new 2013 iMac. But he can't get video to work with EFI and GPT boot at all. He says, I still need UEFI and GPT boot because some of the Mac apps I still work on and support. So his questions are GPT and UEFI boot and working Intel or NVIDIA graphics mutually exclusive at present?
No, I think those are the only combinations that work.
Yeah. And he says, is this an issue only for Apple hardware? Will others have problems too? Is the best solution likely to be hacking a fake MBR using GPT sync?
I'm not sure what exactly the problem he's having is. He doesn't really describe that.
Doesn't give any error messages specifically. One thought is perhaps because he mentions later on in the comments that he can boot PCBSD, and which gives him a working X, which is only in BIOS MBR mode, which we're working to change that. We're looking at adding EFI support, UEFI support here pretty soon.
So I don't.
Since it would work with ours, we had been building our packages with new Xorg on for a long time. Right. I'm wondering if he was still fetching packages or ports or whatever without that turned on.
Yeah, although he's talking. Oh no! So he's getting GPT UEFI boot to work, but he's just having problems with his graphics drivers.
He just couldn't get X started, which makes me think you were using the older packages.
Yeah, you might. If you edit, on the wiki on wiki.freebsd.org, there's the URL for the Xorg repository. So there's basically a separate binary package repository that has the newer. Or has all the packages compiled with the new Xorg flag, and that's the one you need to make it work with the Intel and AMD drivers. I'm not sure quite how NVIDIA fits in with this whole DRM, DRI stuff.
Yeah, the NVIDIA should have just worked.
Right. So, I don't know how the NVIDIA fits in with the KMS stuff, but...
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the problem is there. I mean, if you can write us back with some extra logs and maybe the errors.
I guess my confusion is what MBR has to do with any of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why that would make a difference in this case. Yeah. UEFI, same thing. Should just work.
Yep.
You could also try pointing your FreeBSD installs to the PCBSD package repo, where we have, if you know our packages worked where you can get X running, then they should work in EFI mode as well.
I guess he's got a couple bug reports here I'll have to take a look at. But
yeah, I'm looking here. Just some of the details about the hardware.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
But as far as graphics drivers and stuff go, what partitioning scheme you have should not make any difference.
No, not in this case. Which is what makes me think because you're using PCBSD and our packages are built differently, those worked. And then when you switched over to the FreeBSD ones, like their packages were built without that flag for a long time.
Someone in the chat room says that he thinks he knows what the problem might be. And so he's going to write us a nice email. And on next week's show, maybe we'll have the answer.
Okay. Well, that'll be cool. Hopefully we can get this solved for you then here pretty soon, Dave. Okay. Well, next up, I guess we'll go straight to Chris then.
Yes. So
asking about Poudre.
Chris writes in and says, hi. He read our tutorial on Poudre up on the website, and he wants to set up a repository for his machine. However, he's very careful when touching the host systems since he's new to FreeBSD, so he does all of his playing around in jails, which is what I like to do as well. So he says, usually I do all of the experiments in jails created by EasyJail because I can throw them away easily. From what I can see, it's not possible for Poudre since it relies on a real FreeBSD system to create the build jails itself. That's not quite true. You can create what are called hierarchical jails. So you can actually have a jail inside a jail inside a jail. That's perfectly allowed. The slightly more complicated things come if you want to do Poudre with ZFS. You have to delegate control of some data set into the jail, which is very briefly described in the handbook. I haven't had time to expand on that section, but enough of the information is there to help you get started. The other thing is that Poudre relies on a couple of kernel drivers for file systems and stuff to do stuff that aren't normally allowed in jail. So you'll have to tweak a couple of settings for the jail and load a couple of modules manually. Normally, a Poudre can load them on demand when it needs them, but when it's running in a jail, it's not allowed to do that. I don't know where the instructions for running Poudre in a jail are. They might be in the official PruDriver documentation now, but if not, we should do a tutorial on how to do that.
I recall seeing a link on the wiki at one point, but I'm not sure where.
Because at one point I was looking at doing it because PruDriver would cause my jail numbers to get up into like the tens of thousands, and that was just for some reason looked unsightly to me.
Sure.
Now they've changed that, so that took away my need to want to care about doing it. But I know at one point you had to have a slightly patched kernel to run PruDriver in a jail, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case anymore. So hopefully we'll have a tutorial on how to do that in the near future. Because it seems like that's something people want to do. And
cool.
I want to... Apparently the PruDriver section in the FreeBSD handbook is a bit weak, so I'm going to have to hack on that a little bit, and adding a section on doing it in a jail would also be useful.
Yeah. He'll have a patch tonight, probably.
No, not tonight.
Maybe not that soon.
Anyway,
cool.
So it's definitely possible to do. So hopefully you can get that going.
Cool. Okay, next up we have Zeke, who writes in. He says, I've been watching your BSD Now episodes religiously. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. He said, I'm a newbie to all things BSD. He said, I've contacted IX Systems and asked them to build a desktop computer that is optimized for PC, free, open, or BSD in hopes of smoothing the steep learning curve to attempt to avoid any hardware incompatibility issues. He said that's what he's looking at.
Cool.
He said his thinking is... Yeah, that is really cool, by the way. More you guys should do that. These guys will hook you up with one if you ask.
Yep.
So he said his thinking is, instead of attempting to find laptops and desktops that are compatible with BSD, why not build a system with components that are BSD friendly? Maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm not an expert. But I've decided to opt for BSD. It's going to be hard, but hey, I'm sure it'll be fun. He's relying on our videos for help and assistance.
Well,
so
we rely on your questions to make our show, so keep sending them in.
So, yeah, we've talked in the past about why don't we have like a BSD-friendly laptop or desktop
or
whatever.
Well, laptops are harder. But yes,
they are.
There's definitely advantages to having, a system you can go out and buy that is just going to work.
Just works.
With everything. The slight downside to that is if there aren't developers using lots of different random hardware, then they're not going to make those different bits work.
Sure.
So, having a standard one is great.
Especially for new people who aren't developers who just want to get something that works. So who knows? Maybe we'll do that down the road. That would be exciting. So he says, also, congrats for your tireless efforts. You guys are fantastic. I have a feeling that BSD and all its variants are going to take off real soon. People are tired of paying small fortunes for computers plus software. He said, I just wanted to congratulate you and say hello. Well, thank you very much, Zeke. We appreciate you writing in.
And let us know when you have questions, because we love that content for the show.
Yeah, when you get that machine, blog about it, take some pictures,
that too.
Put it up on the net. That would be cool too. We'll highlight that in a future episode. Okay, so next up, Bastian, I guess, is writing. You want to field this one?
So he's asking about his FreeNAS. He says, I'm moving data from one data set to another, which is on the same volume. However, in ZFS, volumes are not the same thing, but he means the same pool. However, data sets are separate file systems. So when you move a file from one data set to another data set, it actually isn't just like a rename, like if you're moving from one directory to another. It actually copies the data and then deletes it off the old one. And he says he's using the command line to do it, and he's running mv minus iv, so interactive, so it asks if you want to overwrite, and verbose, so it lists as doing it. And he's moving a certain folder to a second data set. And he says the total size of his pool is 2 terabytes, and currently there's about 1,200 gigabytes used, and the size of the directory he wants to move is 600 gigabytes. He says, after a while of moving progress, I've noticed a yellow sign in the FreeNAS GUI saying that he's filled the volume to 80% capacity. After a while, I've received email alerts from FreeNAS that the capacity of the tank is now at 90%, and you should try to keep it under 80%. That's why FreeNAS hasn't deleted already moved files and freed up the space. Is it a bug or a feature? What is happening? Or what would have happened if I tried to move 900 gigabytes of data? So there's a couple things. I'm not sure. Does the move utility delete each file after it's done, or does it delete them all at the end?
That's a good question.
I'm pretty sure it deletes them as it goes.
I thought it was in place. Yeah.
Most likely what's happening there is that you have a snapshot of the original data set somewhere. And so when you delete files, it's not freeing the space because those blocks are still used by the snapshot. So you'll need to look in your snapshots and delete the snapshots from the old data set to free up that space. Because that's a feature of ZFS. And
in case you wanted to restore those, like maybe your move failed partway through or something happened,
Yeah, and if you tried to move 900 gigs of data, eventually the pool would get full and it would just stop writing the new files. And you would have to find and delete those snapshots in order to clear up the space. But yeah, the big thing there is, snapshots are very helpful, but yes, you have to sometimes find them and get rid of the oldest ones to free up some space.
Sure.
There's some cool command line tricks for that. There's a special property called written, which can tell you how much data is actually different across the two snapshots. So when you're doing like your ZFS list -t snapshot and it lists all the snapshots, if you use -o to set the columns, you have your normal ones like name, used, and so on. And there's and refer is how much space is currently being used by that. Well, if you look at a snapshot, it can say, oh, it's referring to like 10 gigs of space. But if you look at the written property, you'll see it's actually using more space because there's blocks that have been deleted or overwritten or whatever that it's still holding on to.
Sure.
And so that's the one that you can use to find which snapshot will, deleting which snapshot will free up a certain amount of space. The other thing is if you're using a new enough ZFS, which you should be if you're on FreeNAS, if you do ZFS destroy -n for no op, meaning don't actually destroy it, and then with the -v as well, and then just give it a snapshot, it would do a quick calculation and be like, deleting this snapshot will free up this much space and allow you to tell how much space that'll free. The other because ZFS was designed to make a sysadmin's life easy, the other thing you can do is file system, like, tank/active at the snapshot, a %, and a second snapshot, and it will delete everything between the first snapshot and the second snapshot inclusive. So it deletes the one you mark as the beginning and end. So you give it a list, you can give it a range of snapshots and it'll delete everything in between or tell you how much space that would free. Because I manually, prune stuff every once in a while from the PCBSD package repo to save a couple hundred gigs of space because you've overwritten all the packages.
Sure.
But yeah, most likely your problem there is the snapshot is causing it not to free the space.
Yep. Okay, well, hopefully that takes care of your problem there. Nuke that snapshot, you'll be in good shape. Yep. Okay, so last up we have Patrick has a question about jails. He says, I have a question regarding jails, which I just said that. He said, I'm using FreeBSD 10 for about a year now on a server, and he's extremely pleased with it. That's good to hear. He said, I'm using IPv4 and IPv6 in my jails without problems, as I do have static IP addresses on that server. He said, now I wanted to create a server from my home with FreeBSD, but a few things are troubling me. He said, first of all, the support for dynamic IPv4 and IPv6 addresses within jails. He asks, is there a way so that each jail acts as its own normal server and using DHCP v4 and v6 to retrieve its IP addresses? IPv4 I could work around by using static addresses, but with IPv6 I don't know how to do it so that every jail has its own dynamic IPv6 address, especially as I do get native dynamic IPv6 networks from my provider with prefixed delegation. That's cool. He says, I hope you can answer my questions, Patrick. So Patrick, take a look at vimage.
Yeah, so with the vimage feature Chris just mentioned, each jail gets its own completely virtualized network stack. Because basically the problem with DHCP is it's based on the MAC address, the hardware address of your network card, and it won't give out more than one address to the same MAC address. And so the same physical machine can't have multiple addresses. It works for VMs because VMs simulate a network card that has its own MAC address. So with the vimage feature for jails, then you can do that, and each jail can then run DH client and run that way. As far as static, like you said, he's already doing static IPv4. For doing v6 is pretty much the same process.
Yeah. Just
when you're
picking an address.
you're getting this big prefix, and then you'll have something like a bunch of letters and ::1 or something. Well, that can be : 2, 3, 4, all the way up to FFFF. So you have lots of addresses there you can play with, and the trick there is with IPv6, there's always, 6 octets, is it? I forget.
I don't remember.
A bunch. And the : is just short form for saying all zeros until this number.
Yeah.
Just to make the addresses shorter to write.
Mm-hmm. But take a look at that. vimage has to be compiled into the kernel at the moment, so that's something you'll have to recompile your kernel for. I know there's been some mailing list traffic about turning that on by default.
Yes. There was a couple of issues specifically with PF, but I guess Martin Matruska's patch got in and apparently solves the issue.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting. That might actually be enabled by default in 11.
Yeah, if that gets turned on by default in 11, that'll be cool. We'll end up using that for our Warden utility and refactoring because, I was telling you before we started the segment, Alan, we have a bunch of users who want to do things like running X apps in a jail, like Firefox or whatever, and all they wanted to do is just grab an IP address so it can talk outside to the outside world. They don't care about serving anything, so that would actually be really helpful and handy to have.
Well, for that particular case in Warden, you could, just make an internal subnet and run NAT off the firewall on the base one. But
yeah, we do have some hacks to do that, but I like this idea a lot better.
Well, yes. And it kind of almost provides that feature that IPv6 has, where each different outbound connection will use a different IP address, so that sites like Google can't as easily correlate, this browsing session with that browsing session.
Sure.
I think it's called IPv6 privacy extension or something. I forget what it's called exactly.
That's nice.
But because there's so many IP addresses, it allows each person to use a bunch of them so that when they're visiting different sites, they don't appear to be the same person. And
very cool.
With your thing of DHCP on your LAN or whatever, your different applications would appear to be different physical computers.
Coming from different locations. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Patrick. Well, hopefully that answers your question. Take a look. I know ifconfig the man page. If you look for VNet, you'll see some information about it in there, and there might be some stuff on the wiki.
I think there's some stuff on the
wiki.
But
yeah, definitely take a look at vimage, get that compiled in, and then I think you'll be able to do what you want to do there.
Yeah. Then once you have vimage set up and you set up the ePair devices so that they're connected to your physical network card, each of your jails can just run their own DH client and be happy.
Away you go. Well, very cool. Okay, so we're going to head right into our next segment now, the mailing list gold, which we kind of debuted last week.
Yes.
So we have a few things here. Do you already have them
already
open to display there?
Yep.
Okay, so talking about ancient bugs, of course, the first one's on OpenBSD Tech. He said if you call the COL1 utility with the -F option, permitting forward half-line feeds in the output stream, and the input stream actually contains half-line feeds in either direction, you end up with corrupt output containing meaningless escape digit 9 sequences instead of the required escape tab sequences. Yep. So how old is this bug here? This bug was introduced in 1990. Wow. May 22nd, 1990. So it's affected all the operating systems as follows: 4.3 BSD Reno, BSD Net/2, 4.4 BSD, 4.4 BSD Lite, Lite 2, and so forth and so on. And of course, all versions of 386 BSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, FreeBSD, Dragonfly, all versions of Debian Linux, and possibly many other Linuxes as well.
Yeah. But yeah,
glad he was able to track that down.
If you're looking at the mailing list post, you can see he uses hex dump to dump a file. And then if he feeds that same input into the call -F and then pipes it through hex dump, the output comes out quite a bit differently. And that's obviously not what's expected.
Sure.
It's like, it's okay. It only changes a quarter of each byte.
Why not? Well, very cool. Yep. Congratulations for fixing, what is that, a 24-year-old bug?
Yeah.
Ouch. Dang. Okay, so what's the next one we got here? I'll let you read this one.
They committed a new, Theo committed the, reinstantiated the warrant canary for Libre SSL.
Okay.
And so this is how people can tell, basically, if Libre SSL gets a national security letter from the US or whatever, and is forced to give up information or something, which I don't understand how that really would apply to Libre SSL, but you get it. The idea of a warrant canary is that they're not, when they're under a gag order, aren't allowed to tell you something. They would just make some subtle change, like taking a notice off of the website, saying that we've never gotten a warrant. If they just delete that notice, then now you know they've got a warrant and they didn't tell you that. And that's how a warrant canary works. Well, for Libre SSL, what you will notice is that the font on the front page will change to be not Comic Sans.
Oh.
Or, sorry, maybe it'll change from whatever it is to Comic Sans,
To Comic Sans.
But I think the whole website was Comic Sans, so if it ever stops being Comic Sans, you know that it's the
Wait,
War
I'm
Canary.
confused. Have we been compromised? Have you guys been given more?
I don't know. They didn't explain it very well.
Okay, well, anyway, that is still very
If you
cool.
see Comic Sans, laugh.
Yes, you're in trouble. Well, very nice, very nice. Well, again, if you guys find other stuff like this, please send it in. Any amusing mailing list posts or interesting tidbits that you run across. I suppose we could do forum posts as well. It doesn't have to be just mailing lists, but that is definitely cool. Okay, well, I guess it's time to wrap up the show then, Alan.
Yes.
So,
yes, the chat room points out that Comic Sans is currently the font. So if it ever changes to not be Comic Sans, you know something hinky is up.
Then you know something's up. Okay, good deal. I'm glad we clarified that. So as we close here, all the tutorials will be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So take a look. There's a wealth of information up there from past tutorials. Also send your BSD related questions, comments, show ideas, or stories you want mentioned to feedback at bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate that. That's the only place we really monitor. So send us something there if you have any questions about anything.
Or if you just find something else out on the internet, let us know so that we can take a look at it.
Cool. And also, OpenBSD is 19 years old as of a few days ago. So happy birthday.
Yep.
And also just passed the 300,000 commit mark. So wow,
nice.
Very, very cool. So congratulations, guys. That's fantastic. Also, we'll mention that PCBSD will be at the Ohio Linux Fest later on this week. So October 24th through 26th in Columbus, Ohio. I think TJ said he might be going to that. But my brother Ken is going. And Drew Levine will be there as well, I know. So,
actually, the team from Jupiter Broadcasting is going as well. So you can say hi to those guys.
Yeah, so if you're out in the Columbus area, definitely head on over there this weekend and say hi to everyone. Also, if you're in or around New York's Capital District, our friend B. Kalla is giving a talk about OpenBSD on October 24th at the, how do you pronounce
Rensselaer
that?
Polytechnic Institute.
Rensselaer Polytechnic.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Institute?
Yeah, that's Brian Callahan from the New York City BSD users group.
Sure. So definitely if you're around there this weekend as well, actually, 24th, that's Friday.
Yeah, that's this week.
Try and make it out if you can. So, and also something we wanted to mention that the FreeBSD graphics team now has a new blog, which we have a link to, which has a bunch of interesting content about what's going on with the graphics stack and Xorg and whatnot.
And just answering questions like, why do we need kernel video drivers instead of using video drivers? And
those are very helpful things to read because a lot of that makes sense. You just need somebody to really spell it out. This is why we're doing this. And of course, I was very excited to see they're moving their development to Git. Good job, guys.
And
that's
talking
fantastic.
about why certain features are only available in 10.1 and later and not the earlier stuff, and lots of good stuff in there.
Definitely. So yeah, this is really cool. So take a look at that when you get a chance. Excellent. Well, I guess that wraps it up for the week then, Alan. We will be back same time next week, probably getting ready for Meet BSD.
Indeed.
And let's see, are we going to be, no, we'll be back before the next show after that. When do you get back?
The Wednesday afternoon or evening. So yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe not.
Right, because the Dev Summit it goes until Tuesday night.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yes, so I'm flying back Wednesday
so
too. But we'll
next week
out.
we'll just do the bumpers around episode.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll see you guys same time next week. You guys have a
watch
good
next week for a
and,
double show.
Definitely, and get signed up for these conferences. We'd love to see you guys out there.
Exactly.
Okay. We'll talk to you. Thanks, guys.